A very good morning to our distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the SICW 2022 SG CyberSafe for Enterprises. For our guests who are here physically in Singapore, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us here. And to our guests who are tuning in virtually from all over the world, a really warm welcome for you as well. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Stephanie Bovis, and it gives me great joy to be here as your MC for this event. Well, we have an exciting lineup of speakers for you this morning, all of whom will share their insights around the theme titled The Human Factor, the Achilles heel in digital security. Employees tend to be the weakest link in an organization's security as attackers continually evolve and advance the sophistication of social engineering attacks. For this reason, the human factor remains a critical issue in creating a secure digital environment. In today's dialogue, you will hear from organizations on how they develop the right strategies to engage employees and also grow a culture of security awareness. Our first speaker, he is a passionate leader and evangelist for Proofpoint, where he leads a team of system engineers to implement people-centric solutions with the purpose to help customers protect their greatest risks and biggest assets, their people. It gives me great pleasure to invite on stage Senior Director, Systems Engineering at Proofpoint APJ, Mr. Adrian Kovic. Mr. Kovic, please.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the session today. We've got an exciting lineup, and it's great to be here in Singapore yet again. The topic of today's discussion centers around the human factor, right? And I think that's a really pertinent part of our security discussions and our security focus. Quite often we get caught in discussions around very advanced technical attacks. We get very excited about new products and new technologies that are there to battle against the ever-increasing horde of bad guys looking to attack our users. But one of the really interesting parts of that whole cybersecurity battle that we fight is the people. Right? The people are at the center of what is being attacked, but also at the center of our defense. And I think a really important point around that people-centric aspect is how do we make sure that our people form part of our defense? And how do we enable them to react to some of the new threats that happen? At Proofpoint, we did a survey earlier this year, which we called the Voice of the CISO. And we actually looked at what is it that keeps the Chief Information Security Officers awake at night, to use that phrase, in terms of the threats that they see against them. And, you know, we collated them, and the usual suspects were there. Many of you have seen ransomware and malware and phishing and business email compromise. But if you put the top 8 together and you line them up, when you look at the top 3 from each of the CISOs, 7 out of the top 8 have one thing in common. And that one thing is the fact that they need a person to do something in order to be successful. So when you think about ransomware, right, very big topic at the moment, both where I'm from in Australia, but also across the region. For a ransomware attack to be successful, it invariably requires a person to do something. For a phishing scam to be successful, it relies on a person to enter their credentials or transfer some money. And while a lot of us are tempted to see that as well, humans are part of the problem. Right? So when we look at the actual event, we start to say, well, it's the human's fault, or maybe if we could only take the humans out of the equation, this whole thing would be more secure. Now, I refuse to see it that way, and at Proofpoint, that's something that we spend a lot of time working on because, in fact, it actually represents a really significant opportunity. If I could take the top 7 forms of attack against an organization, and I could deploy one tool that could deal with all of those, I'd gladly buy it. But the thing is, that tool, that measure, that defense is amongst us. It's us. And so for any cybersecurity strategy that's looking to reduce the risk of cyber attack, it can't simply be about technology. It can't simply be about vulnerabilities in technical infrastructure. It has to acknowledge the people, and it has to use the people for the potential that they bring to be able to thwart these attacks. Again, if I could make sure I built a culture that made people question, that made people aware of the threats that pose them and aware of their ability to be able to help reduce risk, I'm going to be in a much better place. And that's a joint effort we have here in Singapore to be able to make Singapore more resilient, Singapore businesses safer from the scammers and the attackers that seek to attack it both today and tomorrow. And we're going to have a great discussion today just about that. I think one of the other parts that makes this conversation even more pertinent now is post-pandemic or during pandemic, which we still are in many ways. How do we confront that challenge of building a security culture when a lot of the time our people aren't in the office in the same way that they used to be? How do we build that culture, that networking, that loyalty, that awareness when not everyone's in the office? That's going to be tomorrow's problem as well as today's. How do we control and protect all the information we have in the cloud? How do we make sure that our users are secure everywhere? Is going to be a challenge. So I'm really excited. We've got a great panel today to talk about that. We're going to have excellent discussions, and I'm really looking forward to being able to go through these issues with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kovich, for welcoming us. You can kindly take your seat onto the stage. And I'd now like to first invite our moderator for the discussion and the dialogue, Chief Information Security Officer in the Asia Pacific region for Google Cloud, Mr. Daryl Pereira. Please make your way onto the stage. And joining him, I'd also like to invite our other two panelists, Co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Cyber Litmus, Mr. Lee Kien Chong. Mr. Lee, please. And finally, Senior Manager, Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Chris Fu. Mr. Fu, please. All right, Mr. Pereira, the floor is yours. Enjoy the discussion.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope we'll have a nice discussion this morning. So my job as the moderator is to not do a lot of talking. I'll just ask a lot of questions. The idea being the panelists will be the stars, right? So we have a very good set of questions today, but I'd also like to invite you to have some questions prepared from the floor, and we'll give you time to ask questions, because we should really try and pick the brains of these experts on the topic of human factors. And it's a good range. So I'd like to introduce the panelists again, if I could. Adrian Kovich, you've just heard from him, from Proofpoint. Adrian, I don't know if you want to maybe spend a minute or less just to articulate what Proofpoint does.
Yeah, thank you. So, as mentioned, I work for a company named Proofpoint. Our primary objective is to defend people and data. And while we're primarily known for email filtering, I guess, and we work with a lot of Singapore's largest organizations around that, I think one of the areas we've really pioneered is the ability to stop or help organizations deal with the risk of attacks by not only protecting from a technology point of view, but adding the people as part of that. And so we really have a more of a holistic view of that. And that's a big part of my job, is talking to organizations and helping them lift that capability.
Thank you, Adrian. And so Kien, if you could also introduce your company. Kien is the CEO and co-founder of Cyber Litmus, and he deals with a very important part of educational awareness for the human factors. Kien?
Thank you, Daryl. So yes, I'm Kien. So I co-founded Cyber Litmus together with my partner to basically make security cultures more accessible to organizations of all sizes. We built a SaaS platform that enables people to build their security awareness programs seamlessly, painlessly, doing things like phishing simulations, micro-learning modules, as well as breach monitoring. So that's what we do. Thank you.
Okay, and last but not least, Chris Fu. Chris is the senior manager at the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in Singapore, and has over 40,000 members, corporate members in his affiliated network. It's an extremely busy job. I don't know how he has time to be sitting here today, but Chris, over to you.
Sure. My name is Chris. I'm actually from Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce. My role in Chambers is basically to drive technology awareness among the members. So I work very closely with the ICT partners to actually drive the awareness. Most of my job actually involved in helping the partners to contextualize their content so that you better suit the our members. Because I think when it comes to working with tech partners, a lot of them tend to actually talk about the technical aspects. But for our member space, they typically want to come from the business approach. Yeah. So glad to be invited by CSA to have the opportunity to share some of the observations of my work. Thank you.
Great. So we might get started with the first couple of questions. And I'm going to ask you, Adrian, to dive in first, if you're OK with that. Yeah. So look, Proofpoint, as I understand it, has a very large research unit. You're looking at things like social engineering, threat landscape, and of course the types of tools that are available to make us humans less vulnerable to human error, right? Because effectively social engineering is human error at its greatest, right? So what are sort of some of the new emerging or have recently emerged techniques that you've observed that threat actors use and try to ramp up in their attacks on us humans today, making the social engineering attack the most prevalent style of attack today, right? Because, back in the day, everyone used to talk about hacking. But if you think about hacking, social engineering is a form of a hack, isn't it? You're bypassing controls by getting humans to override the standard process. So what are your thoughts on the latest techniques?
So that's very right, and I think that human aspect is something that we know attackers are spending a lot of time on. I guess just to give a what's changed recently that's made things more interesting for the attackers, but also more challenging for us is, I know I mentioned earlier, but the shift to remote working has made it really difficult. And why it's made it difficult is because built into a lot of our corporate culture is, I see you every day, we talk, and we know each other, right? And we build a sort of a group immunity, if you like, or group defense, and we know how processes work, and you would never normally email me for something that you could ask me for example. The move to remote work has changed that, right? So we communicate a lot more electronically. The other sort of surrounding trust that we might build isn't there. And so we are automatically more susceptible because of that, right? And the challenges that we have around business processes become really, to the fore. So to answer your question around some of the evolving areas that we see, one of them I'd like to highlight is really that business email compromise area. Like a lot of businesses have processes around transferring money and so on that aren't necessarily resilient to attack. And again, without that human-to-human aspect, you don't call me Adrian, you might call me Aid, that sort of thing. Without that human context, it becomes difficult because we're communicating. So we know attackers have ramped that up quite a bit, and we see them extorting a lot of money from organizations here and globally. The second one, just quickly, is also around the theft of identity through phishing. So now we use a lot more, whether it's Office 365 or G Suite or any one of these SaaS platforms, attackers know that if they are able to get to the keys to the kingdom by stealing their username and password, and we've seen ways to get around multi-factor authentication, it gives them a lot more access. Right? And so we're seeing variations on both those both of those themes increase significantly, and that's the big area that a lot of organizations are concerned about, in addition to things like ransomware and so on.
So ultimately, in your view, Adrian, so the attackers are primarily after the user IDs and the credentials, is that right?
In order to be able to subsequently get access to other resources. Now that we're in the cloud so much, we have so much of our resources meant to be available remotely, right? And the identity we present to be able to do that is something that attackers really prize.
Great, thank you. So deepfake technology, let's talk a bit about that one. The advent of deepfakes and biometrics being one of the ways in which we authenticate ourselves, one of the factors in multi-factor being biometrics. So how can deepfakes throw a spanner in the works in terms of social engineering, and what can be done about it?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we're certainly at the beginning edge of that. But when I say that, but I also will point out that impersonation happens already, right? Impersonation happens as a form of attack against a lot of organizations, be it through email, be it through even phone calls. So that we're already on that wedge, if that makes sense, even without the Tom Cruise videos and so on that we've seen. That erosion of trust of identity is something that deepfakes are going to be able to take advantage of, and I foresee a significant increase in attackers looking to take advantage of what's effectively someone else's identity to get access to resources they shouldn't have access to.
So in your view then, is it going to be a situation where you don't use your face as one of your biometric factors?
Well, I think it'll be another one of those, from a technology point of view, another one of those cat and mouse games that we have where maybe a first generation technology can be got around, but there'll be an answer to that, and then subsequently an attack and so on. I mean, we're confronted with that with multi-factor authentication already.
Yeah. Sorry, so this is just, one of the curveball questions I promised. Multi-factor authentication, how effective is it in your view?
Well, it's better than not having it, right? So it's definitely an improvement. But you would have seen in a number of the recent hacks, there was one in particular where what they call an MFA bomb was sent. So attackers have worked out that if they simply send what they call a push notification, the user will eventually see it and they'll either want it to go away and just press OK, this is horrible, or the attackers will be even smarter and say, hey, this is your IT department, I'm calling, you've just had a code pop up on your phone, can you please tell me what it is, because that'll allow us to be able to identify you are who you say you are. And there you go, fantastic, and use those 6 digits to be able to then log in. And that's not science fiction, that's fact, right? We saw that in a very large breach only in the US only a month ago.
Yep.
So it's definitely better than not having it, but we need to be, like all technical controls, aware of the limitations.
That's right. Thanks, Adrian. I'll move on to Chris now. Chris, as part of your work in the Chamber of Commerce, I think you have a very large membership. We just talked about over 40,000 corporate members, both big and small. And I think your organization frequently reaches out to its members. You do outreach sessions to talk to members about digitalization. And you're sharing me earlier that digitalization is often what they're focused on, and cybersecurity is often takes a back seat. It's something they, and you said to me famously, it's Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce. The typical Chinese businessman does not want to spend more than he needs to, right? And so if it's going to expand the baseline and the revenue, digitalization, they're all for it. If it's going to erode that revenue for not any kind of clear advantage, they'll try to minimize it. Hence, cybersecurity is a bit of a challenge. So in your work around cybersecurity and data protection and your engagement with members, have you seen that enterprises, the Tauke businesses that you deal with, the small, medium enterprises, are becoming more aware about the cyber risk and what they need to do deal with it as employers? Or is this still something that's a bit of a tough ask in the industry?
Gerald, Daryl, thanks for asking this question. So I think it's a good question. So I think the main thing for the SMEs, right, when they come to the whole perception, right, phishing is something that is actually affecting all businesses, not just SMEs as well as the big corporates as well. So I think the number one inquiry that Chambers face is regarding all the sessions that we run, number one thing is how can they stop phishing effectively? Because this is the number one cause. Because I would just like to share experience for one of the cases that we encountered was that there was a CEO whose email was being breached, and then through his email, it was actually a lot of emails were actually sent out to other CEOs. And because of that, right, and because of the trust level that this affected CEO has, a number of the other CEOs also opened up the email. So I think from that perspective, I think phishing is something that everybody knows. I think when it comes to psychological aspects, right, everything that you face on a daily basis, that is the number one issue you want to address. So I think when it comes to cybersecurity, for all businesses that we face, phishing is the number one thing that they keep highlighting, that how can we stop this effectively. So when you say about perception, everybody knows it's there, but if it comes from a daily perspective, phishing will be the number one. Yeah, and that really highlights the need to address cybersecurity gaps, but phishing, yeah, I would say.
So do you find that convincing the Taukes and the SME owners to take action is getting easier, or is it something that needs more work on? And how do you go about that?
Okay, so when it comes to security aspects, right, I think with the evolvement of cloud technology, I think one of the key aspects is, I think there's a common consensus in Chambers or the members saying that I'm just a user of technology. So assuming that it's something like a utility. So when I turn on a tap, I expect clean water. So why should I bother about the filters and the pumps that's going at the back to deliver me that clean cup of water. So when it comes to cybersecurity aspects or even usage of IT, a lot of SMEs are asking, can I just be a normal user of IT and not really bother about that? So in the Chamber's perspective, we are seeing that that possibility is becoming clearer and nearer with cloud. Because with cloud, everybody seems to be building tools, and once you build tools, SMEs will be subscribing that as a service. So I'm just a consumer, and that relates to the tap analogy. Yeah. So I think that is what a lot of SMEs hope as they use more technology, right, to move towards that area, basically.
Yeah, so that's quite complicated. I sense Adrian has something to add there, but let me ask you the next question before we let Adrian chime in. What are some of the sort of typical or common reasons you think enterprises, particularly the smaller ones, pay attention to human factors or not, right? Do you think it's something they actually understand is a risk factor? Because, you know, when we talk about cybersecurity, the average business owner thinks of it as an IT problem. We were talking before the break that, like you said, they want to just use it as a utility. It's IT, it's turn it on. I don't need to know how it works and how the gears churn or not churn. That's not my problem. Yep. So do they appreciate that cybersecurity actually can be a business risk, therefore a business problem, and that the employees may often be the weakest link in their, in their whole cyber defense?
Okay, so bringing back to the aspects of phishing, right? Because phishing is mainly from emails. Email is a common tool that's used by all employees. So in that aspect, everybody knows that there is a risk. And I think from our surveys and stuff, the first thing that a lot of the SMEs are doing is to actually just equip themselves with the AV virus to install on all the machines. Then the rest of the things, they need to depend on IT to solve the rest. Yeah, but when it comes to the basic expenditure, everybody knows that AV is the number one thing. Even to today, it's still relevant. So most of them will actually at least get an AV in mind. Yeah.
Cool. We might give Kian a bit of a chance to jump in here, Kian. So in terms of, sorry, we've got a problem here. As an organization, sorry, just one sec. Let's get the right question up for you. Okay, so Kian, in terms of your organization, Cyber Litmus, you're focused on training, right? I'm going to give you curveball questions as you can understand why. The purpose of training the individual user, I've been told this, is not working because you can train them as much as you like. Humans are humans, and humans will do what humans do best, not follow rules, right? So is there much point in training individuals on cybersecurity in order to defeat this human factor situation? And what type of training is, in your view, more effective to help create that level of awareness, right? So there's two questions here. Do you believe in training? Does it really work? Number one. And two, if it does, what type of training do you think is the most effective?
Thank you, Daryl. That's a great question. So when you refer to cybersecurity awareness training, I think perhaps you were referring to the traditional classroom style security awareness training. And if you were referring to that, then I would say that it definitely needs to progress with the times because people are engaging with materials in different ways, learning styles are changing, the demographics of the people who are your learners within the classroom is also changing. So given that, I would still say that classroom training can still have its merits, but you would have to change the model a bit, right? So instead of being a more singular directional type of training, you want it to be more engaging. You want to incorporate team training, which has shown to improve learning engagement and retention. You can also promote perhaps different levels of gamification within the training as well. Within the classroom, for example, through the use of things like cybersecurity awareness, board games, incorporation of cybersecurity, micro-learning materials throughout the day, and micro-assessments to make it actually more engaging. So traditional training can still be effective, but it does need to be upgraded in some sense. And the second question.
Well, does it really work, right? So you've trained all the members, to death, and the board members and the C-suite. Is that going to stop cyber attacks from being successful? Is it really the most effective way in spending your resources? If say you're Chinese Chamber of Commerce, would you spend money on training, or would you buy stuff from Andy from Proofpoint? Do you know what I mean?
No, it is absolutely critical because, you know, I think we've touched on this a couple of times already. You know, technology is something that the humans use. And, you know, the topic of the for today, the human factor. How do we make sure that everybody is on board? Because having a strong security culture is not just about having the most fancy tools and processes in place, but also involves having the right mindsets and you know, level of awareness for the organization to be able to better use these processes and tools to build their security culture and from there mitigate their level of cybersecurity human risk. So it's still very critical to do that. Yeah.
Great, thanks for that. So Adrian, back to you. So improving security behavior, we were just talking about that a moment there with Kian, and culture, right? So looking at how the organizational culture works, do you think something that, in your view, is this something important around how to deal with the cyber threat issue? Is it, you know, is it worthwhile training the board and the C-suite and forgetting about the employees? Or do you train the employees more so because they're the ones who are actually dealing with the operations of the business? How do you deal with this thing?
Yeah, good question. And again, I sort of want to emphasize that it's becoming more difficult but more important to make sure we maintain a cybersecurity culture in an organization because of all the factors I talked about before. Look, there's certainly an aspect of rising tide lifts all boats, meaning you want to have a general level of cybersecurity awareness for your organization. I think some of the areas where we've been quite successful in helping organizations reduce risk has been around understanding not only, I guess, you know, not only looking for a broader sort of uplift, but being able to get a view of who's targeted in your organization and how, right? So if there's a particular area of your organization that's targeted with finance scams, and that's really common, right? So in most organizations, you'll see very clear bias towards finance scams for people in finance. Now that kind of sounds obvious, and it kind of doesn't. Now the reason why that's there is because people put so much on LinkedIn about what they do, right? So if you want to get the most bang for your buck, and your scale allows you to do that, well, having that visibility of who's attacked with what, right, becomes very important to then focus your efforts. And similarly, understanding who's more vulnerable in your organization, right? So are they more likely to fall for an attack because they failed the last phishing test, right? Not necessarily a watertight way of measuring it, but maybe they act in such a way in terms of other ways we can assess log-on times, etc., in a more dangerous way. Maybe we spend more time training them, right? And building up metrics around that. And I guess finally, also understanding who in your organization you should worry about more if they were compromised. And I mean, that could be the CEO, we talked about that just a second ago, but that might also be people these days with access to SaaS systems that can transfer money.
So a question for you, to expand on that theme. Who is responsible for setting the cybersecurity culture in any given organization? Is it the CISO, the CIO, the CEO, the board, the staff?
Yeah, I think we're talking about a risk to an organization. So I think certainly that is should be broader than the CISO organization, right? So that should be the way that the a good analogy, and not a perfect one, is occupational health and safety. You know, who's responsible? Who should be the one person saying don't hurt yourself on the job? We don't treat it that way. We see occupational health and safety as everyone's responsibility, and cybersecurity is a similar kind of risk with analogous impacts. It's something that should be a broader part of not only management, but something that should be pushed to the rest of the organization as well. And again, as part of that way of reducing risk to the organization.
Okay, thanks Adrian. So, Chris, improving security behavior, right? You've got this idea of culture within the SMEs that may be slightly different than big enterprise. Typically it's owner-owned and driven. The way in which they treat these types of issues can be quite different than a large corporate. So I think you have, coming from a small business angle, resources can be constrained, right? That's one of the biggest issues. So can you share perhaps some of the more practical ways a small business, sole proprietor type business can deal with the cybersecurity issue in order to build a better cyber culture, given the level of constraints around resources that you have, right? You don't have deep pockets. Maybe you don't have the interest in the topic. You shared to me before that when you get security vendors to come give training to the Chamber of Commerce members, their eyes glaze over because they all talk in techno-babble and you've had to train the vendors to speak business language. So there tends to be a bit of a gap between the people that can help you with the people who need the help. So how do we get cyber culture to be an important top of mind issue for your members and people in SME type businesses?
Okay, personally for me, I feel that the CSA has actually come out with a great tool, which is the Cyber Essential certification. I think before that, there's a tabletop kind of assessment, and it's actually free for everyone to use. So for my side, I'm actually encouraging my members to use that as a first basis to actually see what is your cybersecurity readiness level. Because I think in a lot of times in the past, when we don't have such certification programs or whatever, right? Wherever you buy a solution or everything, you just assume that you're protected. But there's no real way to actually gauge what was your actual cybersecurity levels, and different vendors will kind of pitch you different things. So I think with CSA coming up with a toolkit like that, that actually for smaller SMEs who actually wants to actually assess their cyber hygiene, coming to the Cyber Essential program if they want to. If not, they can use the toolkit just to do a tabletop assessment, just to make sure where they are. And at least with that, they know their standing and they know what's their risk. They can actually go in and ascertain which area they want to address. For those who feel that their operations is very essential, view credibility very highly, I think they should actually use that as a first tier, just to get the essentials, just to have a feel of it first, because going through a certification process may be quite rigorous, but then you can always go through that basic one, which is, from what we hear, is quite simple. To get it done and have a feel, then that way you can actually incorporate as a culture within the company. Because bring back to the experience of, let's say, in a manufacturing plant, right? How do you build a culture of quality? It's through your ISO 14001 and all those things. And similar to that, SMEs can use such a basic certification just to build that resilience. And using that tool, you can actually build up your resilience in the sense that going the different pillars, right, that's covered in the certification, it actually helps you to build the individual resilience within your company. So I would say it's for everyone. Start small. Start with that. Even if you don't want to go with the certification, which I heard is very cheap, less than a couple of $100, below $500 if you're small SMEs. So, but if not, you can actually go through it. And at least with that, you will know what you should actually negotiate with your current IT security providers and actually discuss how you should move forward with your whole journey, basically.
Right. So the certification part you mentioned is called the Cyber Essentials Mark,
yep, correct.
Which you said is not too expensive. But there was another piece that came before that, which was the self-assessment tool.
Yep.
How much does that one cost?
That's free.
Free?
Yeah, free.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's important, right? So for members in the Chamber of Commerce, I think this will be a great opportunity for them to leverage some of the best, IP on the topic. I think that's great. So this is something that SCCI is promoting through the network then?
I think we're trying to build on top of that, because I think CSA side, they build up a lot of interesting resources. So I think for us is that the ICT partners industry is pretty scattered. I would say that there's no, for those who are on the 14001 it's fine, but that's more for the internal companies. Yeah. But when it comes to engaging the customers, right, there don't seem to be a general documentation that the general SMEs can actually rely on to form a framework. So personally, I find that CSA, when they come out with the resources, that forms a very good, proper framework. If they can get it done well, and if everybody does it, the ICT industry actually has a very good opportunity to assist in that area. So that's what I saw the value of the resources that CSA has actually come up with. And we are actually trying to see whether we can work with AISP, for example, to invite their professionals to join in such sharing sessions, to go a bit deeper into some of the resources to actually help the SMEs build up all these wonderful capabilities. Yeah.
Great. Sounds like a good opportunity. Thank you. Kian, so cybersecurity awareness, back on training and keeping it interesting. Look, in your view, how has cybersecurity awareness training been made different, more interesting, more exciting in today's world? And you obviously don't run just a run-of-the-mill training organization. We've been talking along the lines. So maybe you could share with the audience here, what are the types of training programs that you've put together, and how would you recommend for them to take this sort of ideas back to make an increasing level of engagement of the end users in order to retain knowledge. Because, science has shown that most humans, when they sit down and read something, like SWOT for an exam, the first pass you might remember only about 20 or 30% of what you read. So when we do training likewise, we don't remember a hell of a lot. So how do you actually raise the level of engagement, which therefore helps them retain what they've learned? So is your company doing run-of-the-mill training, or are you doing something different?
Thank you, Daryl, for the excellent question. We try to make it more exciting and interesting. So there are, I think, two main pieces to this. One is that the topics must be made more relevant to the end users. A lot of times we always say cybersecurity for your corporate cyber hygiene, cybersecurity for your corporate acts. And perhaps we can actually tune this differently, because many of these cybersecurity habits are translatable from your home life, your personal life, the community life, your corporate life. So if, let's say, corporates start offering things like cybersecurity to keep your kids safe, to keep your family safe, to keep your immediate community safe, for example, is actually, we tend to see that there's a greater interest and uptake in this kind of material. And this is effective because you will see that these habits that we are trying to promote and instill actually get translated into the corporate cybersecurity culture as well over time. So that's one piece. The other piece is to make it actually a lot more accessible and bite-sized. So what we do actually is to cut it down to about 3 to 5 minutes long, because that's what we found as well to optimize engagement with the material. Right? We experience higher completion rates, etc. And we're able to see that people are actually more interested to start, complete, and to actually take the assessment at the end to make sure that they are able to understand the material. And there's also a competitive element. So there are dashboards, etc., that many providers, ourselves included, have created to enable people to have that competitive element, to make it more fun, right? For example, how low is your simulation, your phishing simulation click rate this month versus the prior months versus the other teams, and how well has the team scored for your quizzes compared to last month and also versus other teams. So that is one way that we've been trying to make it more interesting and exciting. Another thing that I guess we can touch on is how we can take this into the next level to make sure that there is continuous improvement and knowledge retention. So in terms of the types of training program, typically there'll be two pieces to it. You would have, number one, the basic annual training that will be conducted. This could take perhaps several hours to get everyone up to speed to the basic level of security awareness. And once this is done, which could be a 3 to 4 hour webinar or some sort of session to give people that level of awareness, we then go into what we call continuous learning. So this is the learning that will remind people. You mentioned 30% only is only remembered if you do it once. So we just keep doing it, right? Every single month, month on month. We are very persistent, and we make sure that that this content is instilled into the end users with things like continuous phishing simulation, continuous microlearning modules being sent out, and also our breach monitoring services, for example. And what we've done is to base this also on the CSA's employee toolkit. So these materials that we've seen and also aligned with would also help them to eventually apply for this certification that will help them to establish a greater sense of security awareness and culture within the organization due to that constant exposure, right? And regardless of where they go to with us and with other partners, they see that there's this thread of similarity and importance that's being placed on cybersecurity, and that we feel will help to improve that level of security culture in organizations moving forward.
So that's 3 really good takeaways, right? Personalize the training, make it more personal for the family, what's in it for me, right? Appealing to that. Make it short and micro, because we are humans and we don't like doing things that take too long, especially the latest generation, right? The ones born with iPads in their arms. And finally, frequency. Micro, but lots of, becomes second nature. Fantastic, thanks for sharing. So moving on, we have obviously quite a few good takeaways here, but I'd like to offer the floor to any questions from the floor to the panelists. We have talked a bit about the human factors. We talked about whether training is as effective. In my summation of what you said, Kian, it's better not having anything. You've got to train people and not just rely on the tools, but training alone is not enough, right? So I'd like to invite questions from the floor. Does anyone here like to raise a question? Yes, out the back, sir.
Microphone's coming.
It's the mic.
Yes, hi. So about cybersecurity training, just sharing some anecdotal evidence. So we conducted cybersecurity training for an organization in Singapore up to 50,000 employees and staff. And we have trained the staff to alert any suspicious phishing email, right? So this, despite the fact that earlier speakers talked about the O365 and all the security gateways has been deployed and all the wonderful solutions downstairs that at level 1. On average, in a good month, every day there's 30 emails that's not been blocked and quarantined by Office 365 or the message gateway. And each of these emails has malicious contents and links that could detonate another NotPetya ransomware as well. So thereby, the human firewall for the cybersecurity training is absolutely critical to train the individuals to help to flag where the machine learning, where the AI fails as well. So this is actually a point I like to highlight. Cybersecurity training is absolutely critical, right? But to the other point, how we actually can effectively do the cybersecurity training. And the challenge I see today is some quarters or industries. I mean, the healthcare professionals, right, the doctors, highly paid. It's very, very difficult to train them, let alone to get them into the classroom or do an online training. Any suggestion from the panel for such individuals, perhaps? Yep.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think to paraphrase it, how do you train highly educated people who do not think they need to be trained? If I paraphrase that.
I guess if I could just, echo that your experience around the numbers is not uncommon for many organizations. I think you said sort of 30 a day. That's, particularly for some of the more commodity emails environments is common. At Proofpoint, obviously, we like to think we do a lot better than that. But I think you hit on the process really well. So not just, hey, I've educated somebody, they're not going to click on that link. Great, right? That's not the end of the story. Being able to build a process that says they submit it, it goes for a review. We then use that to protect the entire organization by finding out to whom was the same email sent. We end up with the virtuous circle of improving not only, the technical part, but also the learning outcomes there, right? Like we noticed that only 3 people out of 100 submitted that. We were sent 100 of those emails, 100 got through, so only 3 people submitted it. Now that's an interesting learning outcome for us as well. To your question about teaching people, and I'll go to some of my learned colleagues here as well. We taught doctors to wash hands. It becomes part of the overall ability for operations to be able to complete their mission. We've seen evidence and examples of where hospitals have been taken offline due to ransomware. And we have seen examples where doctors and other important parts of society aren't able to do their job because of incidents to do with cyber. So that's not an easy message to deliver, but I'm sure there's people who have probably forgotten more than I've ever known, and teaching them something new becomes difficult. But I think it's all of our responsibility, and encouraging a culture where it is all of our responsibility. And there's finesse around how you deliver that information as well, but it can't simply be something that I'm too important to do.
Kian, would you like to add to that, please?
Sure. Thank you, Daryl. Those are all fantastic points, by the way. And perhaps I'll just add in with, again, the beauty of microlearning. Because we experience this on a regular basis as well with our clients. They mentioned that if my team member is producing X amount of revenue, which could be quite significant, if I take him out, not only I forgo that revenue, I have to pay for training costs and among other things. So what we've done actually is to propose things like having microlearning to be sent out to these professionals in very short bursts. So if, let's say, the idea was to give him a 3-hour-long, give him or her a 3-hour-long training, we would then split this into perhaps 20 modules, which would then be sent on every weekday for, let's say, a month. So within a month, they would kind of complete, this number of modules, which covers the same topics that they would have covered. But of course, sometimes they would complain. They would say that, look, you're now eating into my lunchtime. Like, I could have been, getting ready and things, but now eating my lunchtime. But it is absolutely critical that, that there must be some balance that we strike, right, to make sure that everyone is educated and also at the same time business objectives are met, because this is a key business risk that organizations must tackle and mitigate. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks both for jumping on that. I also like to add my piece if I could. So specifically on medical professionals, we need to find a hook for any professional that they can relate to. So for medical professionals that are in the business of saving lives, if you can somehow connect in their minds that cybersecurity or cyber attacks can cost lives. For example, an attacker might be able to get into the network and switch off the biomedical devices that keep people alive, or somehow change the dosage of medicines that are being applied and therefore cause death. If you can illustrate to them that the cyber attacks could potentially impact what they're in charge of, keeping people alive, they may be more willing perhaps to complete the training. So what's in it for them is often why people don't or do things. So, and Kian mentioned that very carefully before, right? Structuring or creating a need for the audience to want to do the training, making it more personal to their situation or their circumstance, I think can go a long way towards maybe helping the medical professionals you work with do the training.
Probably I'll chip in a
Chris.
bit.
Yep.
So I think probably I'll just relate back to, because my wife is in the manufacturing industry, so I have to bring that back in. The context seems to be the same. So I think in her role, right, I think there's this thing called competency. So, which is what you have to be competent in something before you can actually do a task. So assuming that if the security is actually the top line direction that the management is going, right, that direction has to be infused into your HR policies. Mm-hmm. So that part of the competency network needs to be built up. And from there, and any changes or things that's evolving through the micro learnings, that's where you have to actually infuse it inside the HR side to make sure if you're not competent in a job by not going through all these modules, you'll not be able to perform your tasks. So that might be one way through a HR approach to tackle this. Just my thought.
Make cybersecurity one of the competencies in order to keep your job, sort of standard hygiene like occupational health and safety, as you mentioned before.
Yeah, and I guess, if by giving you access to a resource, you're presenting more risk to the company than benefit that we're getting, then we won't give you access to the resource.
Correct.
Right? And if that means that you can't do your job.
Yep.
Great. Thank you all. So I think we're fast running out of time. I'd just like to surmise what the panel's put together. I think the human factors risk certainly continues to be the biggest problem we have. No matter how good the technology is or the processes are, humans can override them. Human override is actually the issue we're dealing with here. And thank you for the question from the floor. Very, ably showed that it is still a problem. You can put in all manner of tools. You even gave good statistics, the number of that get through all the AI and tools that you blocked here, and without user training. And think of it this way, the human factor is the last mile, and therefore dealing with the human factor, training the human, is that last mile of the cyber defense kill chain stop, right? So we do need to work on it, but cyber culture is hard. As mentioned just now, how do you make people not want to do something, do something? It's got to be personal, it's got to be something that connects to their business or personal interest. It has to be something that's micro, because people learn in bite-sized chunks, and it needs to be repeated continuously so it becomes hygiene, standard hygiene, that you don't think the second time it's something you're used to doing. So with that, panelists, thank you very much for sharing your insights, and I look forward to having more conversations on the floor. Please reach out to them because we'll be around. Ask them more questions if you like. And thank you everyone for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pereira, and to our esteemed panelists for that fruitful discussion. Thank you so much. I'm sure we've all gained some insights. You may now take your seats. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now take a very short break as we set the stage for the SG CyberSafe Partner Appreciation Ceremony. So don't go too far. We'll begin in about 10 minutes' time, I believe that is. And we'll be joined by our guest of honor, Senior Minister of State, Mr. Tan Kiat Hao. So till then, enjoy your break. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor has arrived. If I can kindly ask that you now make your way to your seats. A very special welcome to our guest of honor, Senior Minister of State for the Ministry of Communications and Information and Ministry of National Development, Mr. Tan Kiat Hao. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, once again, a very warm welcome to the SG CyberSafe Partner Appreciation Ceremony. I'm Stephanie Bovis, and I will be here as your host once again for this part of the program. The SG CyberSafe program was launched just last year in 2021 as part of CSA's Safer Cyberspace Master Plan to help Singapore enterprises raise their cybersecurity posture. As part of the program, a suite of initiatives ranging from cybersecurity toolkits to a cybersecurity certification scheme has been rolled out to support enterprises in their cybersecurity journey. CSA has been working closely with our partners and supporters to amplify these initiatives to the broader business community. We're here today to acknowledge the outstanding contributions by industry partners and supporters, as I mentioned, of CSA's SG CyberSafe initiative. It now gives me great pleasure to invite on stage our guest of honor, Senior Minister of State, Mr. Tan, for his opening remarks. Mr. Tan, please.
Industry partners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. At last year's Singapore International Cyber Week, SICW, I launched the SG CyberSafe Partnership Program and thanked the pioneer batch of industry partners for joining this program. And I thank these partners for your continued support and would like to welcome a new batch of partners today. I'm here to emphasize three messages to everyone today. The first message is that no business, large or small, is safe from cyber attacks. Second message is that we are making it easier for all businesses to stay safe online. The third message is that everyone can play your part. As I said earlier, no business, large or small, is safe from cyber attacks. Many SMEs think that they won't be affected because they are small and less important. While they may not be the primary targets, SMEs can be collateral damage or be targeted because they are part of a large firm's supply chain. For example, just last year, the number of ransomware cases reported in Singapore went up by 54%, and SMEs made up the bulk of the affected companies. One of the incidents affected a private clinic, healthcare provider, and more than 70,000 of the patient's personal data were compromised. In a separate data breach incident, the attacker allegedly compromised a retailer's network, gaining unauthorized access to the personal data of more than 300,000 customers and nearly 600,000 transaction records. Businesses must take the cybersecurity threat seriously. We are seeing more sophisticated threats and more brazen bad actors. For example, with ransomware as a service, criminals no longer need to know the technical know-how to launch ransomware attacks. You just need to go online and provide an attack to a service operator who will launch the attack. All transactions are done easily and anonymously. The service operators may even provide a portal that displays the status of the infections and any other information about the target. Very customer-centric. The SG CyberSafe Partnership Program is therefore an important initiative to help our businesses stay safe in the cyberspace. As part of this program, CSA launched a certification scheme for companies. These certifications can allow customers to identify firms that adopted good cybersecurity practices. The scheme, which comprises the Cyber Trust and Cyber Essentials mark, are designed to suit the risk profiles and needs of businesses. Companies with more extensive digitalized operations can consider the Cyber Trust mark. This mark certifies that a company has put in place comprehensive cybersecurity practices and measures that are commensurate with the higher cybersecurity risk profile. Take 8x8, for example, is a software as a service provider. The Trust mark gives 8x8's clients confidence that they are a trusted third-party software supplier. The Cyber Essentials mark, on the other hand, is designed to be accessible by most companies. The simplified approach makes sure that companies focus on 5 key cyber hygiene areas, such as cybersecurity awareness training for employees and implementation of protection measures against malicious software. An example would be Lush Health, a traditional Chinese medicine clinic that has attained the Cyber Essential Mark certification. It was recently featured in 联合早报. Lush Health recognized that Cyber Essentials Mark provides their customers with greater confidence to transact with the company. I'm very heartened to see 47 companies that have received their certifications, with 16 in the process of being certified. I encourage more firms to participate in this scheme. I'm so pleased to share that the Singapore Standards Council, or SSC, has approved and published the Cyber Essentials and Cyber Trust Mark certification as a national standard. This is an important milestone for the certification scheme. Technical Reference 106, which is called the Tiered Cybersecurity Standards for Enterprises, is the joint effort of representatives from industry and trade associations, professional bodies, academia, research institutes, government agencies, and individual experts. Thank you very much for all your contributions and support, and I'm very glad to see wide support for the trust marks amongst the standard community. Cybersecurity certifications on the processes in firms are necessary but insufficient. The right set of products and services are necessary. However, businesses, especially SMEs, are often overwhelmed by the many options of cybersecurity products and services out there in the market and don't know which ones suit their needs better. Oftentimes, businesses tell us they don't even know where to start looking for information on these solutions. I'm therefore pleased to announce that CSA will be publishing an online directory of cybersecurity solutions providers to guide the decision processes of businesses. Firstly, businesses benefit from greater transparency. Businesses will be able to review and compare the service provider's track record, reference customers, and whether the providers themselves are certified under the Cyber Essentials or Cyber Trust marks, amongst other information. Businesses can better navigate the many cybersecurity solutions in the market and choose the providers that best meet their needs. Second, SMEs can tap on service providers in a listing to implement cyber hygiene measures outlined in the Cyber Essentials mark so that they can stay protected against common cyber attacks and get the Cyber Essentials Trustmark certification. Thirdly, we are also lowering the barriers to adoption. Some of the solutions providers' offerings are also pre-approved under the SMEs Go Digital program, so businesses can qualify for funding support when they use these solutions. So I encourage all businesses, regardless of where you are at your cybersecurity journey, to leverage available resources and apply for the Cyber Essentials or Cyber Trustmarks. Investing in cybersecurity takes resources, time, and effort, especially so for SMEs. But it is an important investment for our businesses, their customers, and all of us. We must get this message to all our businesses. Therefore, raising awareness of cybersecurity will continue to be an important priority for the government and CSA. I'm happy to share with everyone that CSA will step up its Cyber Safe series to raise awareness amongst the business community. I thank all partners who have been working with us to advocate the importance of cybersecurity and welcome new partners to work with us on this effort. Besides the Cyber Safe series, we want to celebrate the achievements of SMEs that have done well and hope that these pathfinders and trailblazers can inspire many others. So I'm happy to share that CSA and the Association of Trade and Commerce, or ATC, will introduce a Cybersecurity Excellence Award to recognize SMEs that have implemented good cybersecurity measures. These SMEs must also have attained the Cyber Essentials certification, must at least attain the Cyber Essentials certification. The nomination window is open, so please nominate SMEs that you know that have done well, and please don't be shy, you can nominate yourself as well. In summary, we are making good progress in creating a cyber-safe space for all of us. We are doing more to help our SMEs to be cyber-safe, and I'm heartened that many SMEs are taking steps to do so for themselves and for their customers. We are also building up a vibrant ecosystem of cybersecurity service providers to support our businesses, and SMEs can access these providers through the online directory that CSA will be publishing. Like our fight against COVID-19, staying safe online requires everyone to play our part. I look forward to your continued support and participation, and I thank you and hope that you have a productive rest of the session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you much, Mr. Tan. Kindly remain on stage for our next part of the program where we present our token of appreciation. So as Mr. Tan was suggesting, cybersecurity is a collective responsibility and everyone has a role to play. So in this part of the program, we acknowledge our partners and supporters of CSA that have walked with us on the journey to create a safer cyberspace for everybody. The first tokens of appreciation will be presented to early adopters of the Cyber Essentials and Cyber Trust marks. They are among the first of the companies to attain the Cyber mark respectively. So I'd like to welcome the companies on stage to receive their tokens of appreciation as I name them. They are CyberSafe Private Limited, Flexon Private Limited, and Contfinity Private Limited. Next, we will present the tokens to companies that attained the Cyber Trust. They are 8x8 International Private Limited, DBS Bank Limited, And finally, NetPlus Asia Private Limited. A big congratulations to all of our early adopters of the Cyber Essentials and Cyber Trust mark. Now, besides recognizing the early adopters of the cyber marks, we would also like to acknowledge the efforts of the certification bodies that have been working so hard to certify the companies for the Cyber Essentials and Cyber Trust marks. Firstly, let's invite the certification body with the best enterprise reach through training, events, and marketing on stage. A big congratulations to BSI Group Singapore Private Limited for being the top campaigner certification body. Next up, we will be presenting tokens of appreciation to the top achiever certification bodies for issuing the most number of certificates for Cyber Essential and Cyber Trust, respectively. A big congratulations to Guardian Independent Certification Private Limited for achieving the most number of certificates issued for the Cyber Essentials mark. And a big congratulations to ISO Cert Private Limited for achieving the most number of certificates issued for the Cyber Trust mark. Moving on, we would like to recognize the SG CyberSafe partners across 3 categories. The first would be the top collaborator category, which is presented to the SG CyberSafe partner that has demonstrated proactivity to collaborate with and support CSA's safer cyberspace initiatives. A big congratulations to Singapore Business Federation. The next category is the top campaigner, which is presented to the SG CyberSafe partner with the greatest reach to enterprises. A big congratulations to Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Fu, once again. And last but not least is the All-Star Partner category, which is presented to the SG CyberSafe partner with the top contributions to the program. A big congratulations to Microsoft Singapore. A big congratulations. Mr. Tan, if I can kindly ask that you remain on stage. Cyber Essentials and Cyber Trust have been approved and published as a national standard. Technical Reference 106, Tiered Cybersecurity Standards for Enterprises, is the joint effort of the standards community in Singapore. I'd now like to invite Chairman of the IT Standards Committee, Mr. Chak Kong Soon, who will now present a copy of the standards document to Mr. Tan. Gentlemen, kindly remain on stage, Mr. Chak, as we invite our other representatives from the ITSC, Security and Privacy Standards Steering Committee, the Standards Working Group, and Enterprise Singapore to join Mr. Tan on stage. Mr. Tan, kindly present a letter of appreciation to our representatives, please. They'll be handed to you individually. Oh, but first a photo. Big smile, gentlemen. Mr. Tan will be handing you the letters of appreciation for you to hand out to our representatives from the Standards Committee. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, what a milestone. Let's gather around the stage for another group photo, but this time with our certificates. Big congratulations. A big congratulations to all of our representatives. You may kindly take to your seats. Mr. Tan, please remain on stage for the next segment. What a milestone indeed. So since the launch of the SG CyberSafe Partnership Program in SICW 2021, CSA has seen strong interest from our industry partners to be part of this program. We'd like to acknowledge our newly onboarded industry partners now to invite them on stage to join Mr. Tan, where he'll present them with a letter of appreciation. So let's move on. I'd like to invite Association of Process Industry. Congratulations. And thank you. ISC Square Singapore Chapter. A big thank you. Lazada Singapore. Imperium Solutions Private Limited. Secure Age Technology Private Limited. ST Engineering, thank you so much for being part of the program. CIO Academy Asia. We now invite Kian back onto the stage. Cyber Litmus Private Limited. Data Connect Technologies Private Limited. Momentum Z Private Limited. Palo Alto Networks. Proofpoint Inc. Singapore FinTech Association, thank you so much for being a new adopter of the SG CyberSafe program. Singapore Telecommunications Limited. StarHub Limited. Association of Trade and Commerce, kindly make your way to the stage. And finally, Cloud Security Alliance, thank you so much for being part of the SG CyberSafe Partnership Program. Once again, congratulations to all of our partners and supporters, and thank you so much, Mr. Tan, for gracing us for this event. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the SICW 2022 SG Cyberspace for Enterprises event. Do note that this live stream will be available on demand until the 18th of November so that you can revisit the session at your own convenience. Once again, I'm Stephanie Bovis. It's been such a pleasure being here as your host, and I'll hopefully see you back here next year. Take good care. If you've traveled from overseas, have a safe trip back home. Thank you so much.